Oh, when the blues go marching in. Oh, when the blues go marching in. Oh, I want to be in that number.
When the blues go marching in. Oh, when the blues go marching in. Oh, when the blues go marching in. Oh, I want to be in that number. When the blues go marching in. Oh, when the blues go marching in. Oh, when the blues go marching in. Oh, I want to be in that number. When the blues go marching in. Oh, when the blues go marching in. Oh, when the blues go marching in. Oh, I want to be in that number. When the blues go marching in. Oh, when the blues go marching in. When the blues go
And we are back with yet another riveting edition of the Cerebral Entertainment Podcast. I am James, and with me, as always, is my good friend, my colleague, my cohort, and my co-host, Colt. How you doing, Colt?
What? I can't hear you.
What?
Can't hear you anymore.
Why?
My ears are dead.
That's because the energy in this room is hopping.
That's right.
You have been
I like
sacked.
that. Hopping.
Yes.
That's a good one.
It is a good one, right?
Yeah.
So good to see you, Colt. Good to be back in front of the mics.
That's right, buddy.
We are at the St. Francis Winery, and specifically, we are at Deslogetown Brewery.
That's right.
Life's better with beer. The ale house at St. Francis Winery. And we are very, very, very gracious to be here with our host, Greg Camp.
James, Colt,
That's right.
glad to be here.
Yes.
Glad you're here. This is awesome.
Thand you very much for having us.
You bring like a built-in audience. This is awesome.
I know, right?
We do
Try
this.
to
We do
that
this everywhere. It makes us look cool.
everywhere we go. It's
Right.
like we have this following, right?
Groupies.
So I'm going to give some autographs later.
Okay.
I actually have to pay them for my autograph,
Sure,
but you know,
sure.
whatever, it works.
Okay, awesome.
It
And they
gives-
just throw it in the trash.
That's fine. It's the optics that matter, you
That's
know.
all
It's,
that matters.
it's making me feel.
Perception and reality, man. That's all that matters.
So, Greg, once again, we appreciate you having us here. This is a great place, beautiful country out here at the St. Francis Winery. And you are the brewmaster. Is that an appropriate term?
Well, I've been called other things, but I'll go with brewmaster.
Let's stick with brewmaster
yeah,
because
yeah.
this is a family show.
Kids are listening.
So, what got you into brewing beer?
As the story as it's been told, is my wife either had the great idea or the horrible mistake to give me a homebrew kit for Christmas one year. In fact, it was 2008, and it was one of those things that it just kind of took off from there. I remember the first beer we brewed was in January of '09. It actually was a variation on a beer that we still make today, we call it Rebel Ale. It's a cream ale style, but that's where it started. We were cooking beer on a gas stove down in the basement, fermenting stuff in a storage room, and that's how it started. In fact, I think for a lot of guys, that's typically how it starts. Most of the guys that are in the industry today, you talk to them, and they probably started as a homebrew.
Right.
And it became an affliction of some sort. Some have gone through more formal training, but really at the end of the day, they got in and got their feet wet, probably brewing a batch in their basement somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how it started for me, and probably did that for a few years. And then obviously being friends with Skip, the owner out here at the winery, we got to talking a couple of years ago, and it was like, wouldn't it be neat if people paid us for this beer? Wouldn't that be what a novel concept?
Right.
So,
People pay for beer? Are you
people
serious?
pay for beer.
Since when?
So, and at the beginning, we were like, well, if it just covers our production costs, that would be a good thing, because then at least the cost of producing the beer it's not on us. it's covering itself, and if there's more that comes with it, then great. So it's like, where do you serve it? Where do you go? How are we going to do this? And he says, we've got that old 30 by 40 shop there, just off the patio at the winery. We could build a new workshop someplace else on the grounds, and maybe remodel it. And as long as we have room for the golf carts, which is where we're sitting right now, as long as there's room for the golf carts, that we could probably really fix that up and have a cool little space as a tasting room for the beer. And it really just kind of happened organically that way, as we just kind of talking about it. And then I think it was in July of 2014 we started working on it, and then started working through your permitting. Obviously, you got to go through the feds, you got to go through the state, you got to go all the amount of paperwork it takes to get a brewery off the ground is ridiculous. And the weird part about it was, as a winery, so as a wholesaler, a manufacturer, and someone that can distribute and sell at retail, he had a lot of that stuff, but we still had to get the federal permitting, and that took the better part of 9 months. We started on that in 7 months. We started on that in July, and it wasn't until January of the next year that we finally got what they call our brewer's permit, and that was in 2015. And we've been brewing beer and serving beer ever since.
Yeah, what you guys done out here is amazing. I mean, me and my wife have been out here quite a few times before you guys even started doing anything with this. Back when this was just
a winery.
Yeah, just nothing. Yeah. And it's crazy to see what you guys have built already. I'm sure it's just going to get bigger.
Yeah. I can't say enough about Skip, because if you think about it, he has been the vineyard has been here since the late 90s. He's been making wine here since the early 2000s. He obviously, the tasting room of the 7 different types of wine he makes, that's been open since 2005. So as far as needing the extra headache, boy, I just don't have enough work as it is. Let's go ahead and open a brewery while we're at it. That's pretty. So someone ought to have his head checked. But if you have a conversation with Skip for any amount of time, you'll say, yeah, he definitely needs to get his head checked, and he'll be the first one to tell you that too. So, but it was just one of those things where when it comes to really doing things in a very simple, organic, natural way, as far as wine or beer, this guy is a walking encyclopedia. It is a thrill to get to brew beer with him. We brewed a couple of batches this morning, as a matter of fact, and it's just the opportunity that he gave my wife and I to be able to come out here and do this on a commercial basis is just awesome. It's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how often do you brew beer?
Well, typically depends, obviously, on demand. We'll really go great guns typically every week. We'll do 2 batches of beer every Saturday morning. We'll start at about 5:30 and finish by 11, and we'll brew up. Like today, we did our Rebel Ale, which is that beer I mentioned earlier. That cream ale was the beer that we made back in the day. And in fact, well, you know this. It's actually Riley's Rebel Ale.
I was going to mention that.
Because the first time I brewed it was on Riley's birthday.
Gotcha.
Which was in March. And of course, it's gone through some variations, some changes, but it's still essentially the same style.
Right.
But we brewed up some Rebel Ale, and then we did our Irish Red, which is on tap right now, actually. So, in fact, I'm having a glass of it as we speak, and I believe you have a little bit as well.
As am I, yes. And it's quite good.
Thank you.
Quite
Thank
good.
you. Yeah.
Very good stuff. So, as far as the selections that you have, the different flavors, is there any story behind that? Are these just your favorite type of flavors? Did you just kind of happen upon what kind of flavors that you have? Because so far I haven't been disappointed with any of them.
And I appreciate that. I think really we wanted to brew. I mean, because you can go to some breweries and they're doing some far out stuff. Okay, right. Barrel aged and stuff that they're putting mango in it, they're putting chocolate in it. We really wanted to give people a sense of a traditional style, and if they liked it, then they knew, okay, now I know I like Irish Red. Now I know I like Hefeweizen. Now I know I like an IPA. So most of our styles, and we do about 15 to 20 different beers. Now, granted, we only have 5 taps, so they do rotate. We can't have and we don't want to have the same 5 on tap every time, because the idea is it's like, I mean, we have people in here, they fall in love with a beer and then it runs out and it's like, well, now you got to try something else.
Right.
So your beer education continues.
That's right. Whether you like it or not.
Come, young Padawan, you have so much to learn. Come. So it's fun to be able to do that. We just had some ladies at the bar here a little while ago, and they were like, "Oh, I don't like that," or "Ooh, I really like this." So it's fun to be able to walk people through. It's the first time maybe they ever had a stout, or certainly a Scottish wheat heavy, or an IPA, or a Hefeweizen, or a pale ale. Maybe the first time they're ever having any of those beers, because maybe they're drinking Bud Light, Miller Lite, and that's fine.
Right.
I don't, and people get all hung up about that from the kind of the craft beer angle.
Oh yeah,
they
kind of like
turn their noses
Right.
up. Oh,
Beer-
you are lesser than me.
beer snobs.
Go away.
Right.
I'm not that way. I never have been. If it's beer and you like it, then drink it.
Sure.
Okay. I think that you're missing out on a world of flavor, because there's more than one type of wine. There's certainly more than one type of beer as well. So
Yeah.
So the idea is to try to be very representative of certain styles. We have a tendency to gravitate towards traditional English or German styles, also some variations on a theme that are more American styles. But for the most part, we try to keep it kind of right down the middle, and if it's something you think you like, then I can tell you, well, that is something similar to this, so when you go to the store and decide to try something maybe from one of the brewers out of St. Louis, whether it's Four Hands or Schlafly or whatever the case, then you know what to pick up.
Right.
Because that's I think the scary part about craft beer is people walk into the grocery store and they get to that big cooler that's full of 100 different types of beer, and they're like, now what?
Right.
Right.
So it helps to have a little knowledge.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm the same way. Like when it comes to craft beer, like especially ever since we did our interview with Jeff Huck a few weeks ago, he's converted me. I can't do regular beer anymore. I tried it and there's no flavor to it anymore to me. Like it's I just can't do it anymore. And but I still am getting the taste for a lot of different kinds. So when I go into a store and look at it, I'm like, do I really want to pay for a whole 6-pack
Right,
when I don't
right.
know if I'm going to like that or not?
Well,
And
and
just waste 5
there's
years?
nothing worse than you'll drop $12, $13 on a
Right.
6-pack of craft beer, and then find out it's something you don't like.
Right.
And I can understand where folks are like, I mean, it's easy enough to say, okay, I'll spend $12, and if I'm getting a case of it, that's a good thing.
Right.
Whereas if I'm only getting 4 or 6 of them, then maybe I'm not ready to take that leap. So what we try to do is give them that sense of style, and if it's something they know that they like, then okay, the next time you go shopping, you're looking for an unfiltered wheat, you're looking for a Hefeweizen, you're looking for a Kolsch. Those are the types of beers. So again, we try to people get people on the wavelength, and then they can make their own choices after that.
That's a great philosophy. I love that, because you can come to a place like this and try different things before you go out and you spend a buttload of money on a 6-pack.
Yeah.
Which a buttload of money for a 6-pack, is $10. You go to Schnucks or any place like that and get a 4-pack of Urban Chestnut.
Right.
And you're paying about $10
Yeah.
for that. And if you don't end up liking that beer, that's kind of a hit on the wallet. So you're like, it might scare you away from the craft beers. That's a great way to bring people to trying new things, is to come to a place like this, just with wine too, for that matter.
Well, and that's just it, because that we kind of borrowed that, if you will, from the winery, because the winery has, obviously, people that are having wine for the first time, they're going to want a sweet wine. Okay, so there's the Tickle Me Pink and the Pine Ridge. And then if you're ready to make a bit of a leap and maybe a semi-sweet white, you could have the Traminette. If you're ready for something that's a little oaky, then you can have the Chardonnay on the white, or you can do the Chamberson or the Cynthiana on the red side. And then there's that dessert wine, which is the Late Harvest, which is it's like pancake syrup. It's amazing, but it's like 20%. So
Wow.
Pancake syrup with a kick.
Holy cow.
Kidding.
But I mean, so the idea is there's a path. We can take you down this path, and we can start you here on the very easy, approachable stuff. But I'll be honest with you, and I know you and I have talked about this, is that when we first started, that's what I thought was going to be our bread and butter. We make several big beers, as I call them, which are alcohol over 7%. We make our 2 anniversary beers. Our first anniversary beer is the Shotgun Wee Heavy. Our second anniversary beer is one called Doppelsticka, and we can get into that name later on.
Sure.
But we also have our Imperial Stout. We have a new one that we make called Triple X Gold. And when you make those big beers, you figure you're going to have a very limited audience. With the stout, the Imperial Stout, it's at 9.4%. If we take it off tap, there'll be a riot. So it's gotten to the point where it was like, okay, we'll rotate the beers through, and every once in a while the stout will be on, and people come in looking for the stout. So the stout is literally hogging a tap all to itself all the time. And I just never would have anticipated that the local beer drinker would be willing to make that big of a leap. And I think that's kind of a testament to them, is the fact that they're willing to come in and say, yeah, you make a Hefeweizen, you make a Kolsch, you make a cream ale, whatever. Give me that big stuff down there at the bottom of the list. And we do that, and they just run with it. And I think that's awesome. I think it's great that they've got that adventurous spirit, so to speak, with craft beer.
Absolutely.
Or maybe it's because it's 9%, and they're like, I can drink 2 of those, and I'm good for the day.
Done.
There's always that, but I think it's also a testament just to the draw of this, because craft beer is not just great beer, but it's also a culture, you know. And so, like we discussed earlier, there is your beer snobs. You have your beer snobs. It's kind of a niche, it's kind of a clique.
Yeah.
But it's a clique that I am happy to belong to.
Sure. Sure.
And so I have had my own metamorphosis. When I was younger, of course, the idea was to get plastered and be, laying on the floor while the earth was spinning beyond my control at rapid speeds.
As cheap as possible.
As cheaply as possible.
Okay.
And so there was that. But as I grew, and I was very much against any kind of beer that had any kind of taste to it, to be honest with you. I was a light beer drinker, and I didn't even really take the time to taste it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's all about the taste.
Yeah.
And that was a process that I went through. And I'm happy to, that Colt has also gotten on that same train with the craft beers.
Slowly but surely,
because
I'm working my way there.
It is, but it's like podcasting. There's a universe of craft beers.
Yeah.
Not just the flavors, but the different breweries that you go to. So your red might taste different than his red or that guy's red over there. And so it's just great to be able to just kind of go around and sample and have a good time with it, because the culture is great. I love it.
I think you make a great point, because, and you mentioned something about it earlier, is I mean, at some point along the line in the process, what I like does come into play.
Sure.
So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, it may not be my favorite style, but we're brewing that style to a point where I like the way it presents itself. I'm comfortable with it, the way it tastes, and I think it's something that other people are going to like. So at some point, my palate does enter into it, and it's just like the brewmaster at Urban Chestnut. If he decides that this is something that he feels has hit that mark from a flavor standpoint, then that's the beer that we're going to taste.
Sure.
Right.
So there is a certain amount of personal interpretation. I mean, I go back to the red again. Only the red's a great example, and because we brewed it today, we call it American red. It's actually an Irish red recipe, but then what we do is we use American-grown hops. American hops, Cascade hops, and we use American yeast, American ale yeast. So the grain bill is very much Irish, but the hops and the yeast are something that is our little take that gives it a different flavor, a different finish. It's amazing how those 4 simple ingredients, which is the water, the hops, the grain, and the yeast, how those 4 things and all the variations on a theme there, the multiple combinations can take a style of beer and make it completely different.
Well, that's
each and every time.
That's
Nice.
one of the beers that I really wanted to try when I was here. Once I seen that it was on the board, because that, for one, that's what we helped Jeff Huck with when we were actually at the brew day. That's the one we helped him make. But we also, that's one of my favorites that he makes also, too. But he always
He's got a very good red.
Yeah, but he calls
Yeah.
it the Irish red, too.
Yeah.
So I was curious what the differences was. I mean, you can definitely distinguish the taste between the two, but both of them are really good.
Ours has a little bit more hop flavor to it. He does something that's a very traditional Irish red, why we call ours American Red is, again, those Cascade hops in there, they're a little more bitter. The yeast finishes out a little more clean than, say, an English or Irish yeast would. So you get a little more of a hop note, especially on the nose and in the mouth, that on our red than you would on a very, very traditional Irish red. So, and I mentioned the nose and the mouth. It's interesting because, when we talk about those commercial brews, the American lager and light lagers, typically served in a can or a bottle. If you think about how you normally drink those beers, okay, your nose is completely removed from the equation because you don't stick your nose in a glass when you're drinking it. Sure. You put the bottle or the can to your lips, and your nose doesn't get to play in the game.
Very interesting.
I never thought about that.
Yep.
So when you're drinking craft beer, always do yourself the favor. Even if you buy it in a can or a bottle, put it in a glass.
Yep.
Because the nose, that's the difference.
Right.
And that's why we make sure that our glasses, especially for our high alcohol beers, the big beers, we put those in a tulip glass that brings that aroma right up to your nose. So when you're tasting it, you're getting that extra flavor that comes from the aroma as well. That's what makes it such an enjoyable experience. It's not just something cold and fizzy that you drink on a riverbank. And there's a place for that. Obviously,
Sure.
If you're on Black River and you're spending the day, okay, you're not going to drink 20 of those, okay? You
Right.
might drink 20 of those, okay?
Yeah.
So, there's a place for everything. So
That's another great point because you don't sit around and drink a 12-pack of craft beer, basically, as to party.
Right.
You just don't do that. There's
Right.
too much flavor. It's just too much. That's when your more mainstream beers, I
Sure,
guare
sure.
Your market, your Bud Lights, your Natty Lights if you're really kicking it, right? But those are the ones that you go out and you get hammered on.
Yeah,
If you're
yeah.
going to do that.
yeah.
Your craft beers, it's all about the taste. It's about the enjoyable experience.
Well,
it's about smelling that
It's
brew.
like what we're doing right here.
Right. yeah.
Okay. Wait, where's your beer?
Colt?
Colt?
I drank it.
We'll have to get you another one.
That would be great, sir.
Okay, but the idea, so we can sit, we can have a glass of beer, we can have a conversation.
Right.
We have the folks that come out to the winery from time to time. We don't have live music out here a lot. We'll have some music playing in the background like that, because we want you to be able to sit down and have a glass of fine wine, locally crafted fine wine, locally crafted craft beer.
Nice.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe have a conversation. Put your phone in your pocket. Okay.
That's not gonna happen. Come on.
Talk to your sweetheart. talk to your group of buddies. Whatever the case may be. But I think that's one of the things that craft beer certainly opens itself up to, is
Yes.
that you're able to sit and do what we're doing right now, which is just talking about something we think, something that turns us on, something that gets us excited.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it transcends just actually drinking or even smelling the beer. Here we are talking about the culture, we're talking about the brewing. It's just this whole package deal when it comes to craft beers that, I don't know, it's just kind of enlightening, to be honest with you. It's just who would have thought? I wouldn't have thought in my past that beer was so freaking interesting, because it is. It's just, there's just so much to it and so many different kinds. I have my sister-in-law's husband. I don't know if you're supposed to call your sister-in-law's husband your brother-in-law. I don't think so I don't. But at any rate, my sister-in-law's husband, right, he is really into Scotch. And there's a whole culture around Scotch, too. And he even went to some kind of a training, some kind of a workshop to learn about Scotch. And who would have known there was so much to know about an alcoholic drink,
Right.
that you'd go to a workshop and learn how to, hold your snifter and how to make
Did
it.
you say snifter?
Snifter?
Snifter.
Yeah,
Is that what
That's
it's
what
called?
they're called.
It's
I've
called
never
a-
heard of that
it's-
before.
You know
It's
why
a
it's
little-
called a snifter? Because
Sure.
you smell it. It covers your nose, and so you actually smell the alcohol. That's part of the flavor. It's part of the experience.
I feel like somebody made that up at some point and it just stuck.
Well, somebody made it up at some point.
And it stuck. And then they were able to back explain it, where it was like,
Right.
and you know why we call it that?
Right, because I was sniffing it. It makes sense, right? It's not a smeller; it's a snifter.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because I'm big into bourbon as well, and it's the same thing. There's such a culture that surrounds that, and there's so many aromas and flavors that come with that, and it's like that way with beer too. Is you just don't realize how many different variations on a theme there are out there. It seems silly to call it beer. Such a simple word, 4 easy letters. We repeat one of them twice. That it's not. There's nothing really all that complicated about the word. It doesn't do justice to the product, because the product is like I said, there's just so many different options out there.
Yeah, it's so much more than just beer.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Those two vowels that back each other up. Yeah, it's so much more than that. Because once again, just the culture and the experience and the community, the camaraderie.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I want to touch on that, because when we decided to do this commercially, we became members of the St. Louis Brewers Guild. They put on the Heritage Festival every year. They put on a Halloween party in Lafayette Park every year. The Heritage Festival moved from Forest Park last year. It's now down on the Arch Grounds, Lenore K. Sullivan Boulevard. Literally, we had a tent set up last year, and our tent was underneath the north leg of the arch. I could turn around. It was like, oh, hello, old friend. How are you?
Wow.
Right.
Only city with a handle. Awesome. But the Brewers Guild is a collection of all the breweries, commercial breweries in St. Louis, and the St. Louis area. So it's anywhere from all the way up to Hannibal, to all the way down to where we are, to Charlottesville, to Crown. We're all members. And when they first started, there were 2 members. There was Anheuser-Busch, and there was Schlafly.
Wow.
And now there are over 60 breweries in the St. Louis Brewers Guild.
No kidding.
And in just the last year, there are 5 that are either open or slated to open. And there's like Third Wheel, there's 2 plumbers. O'Fallon opened a new tasting room. Alpha Brewing's getting ready to move into a new facility. Civil Life is getting ready to open a new facility. The number of breweries in St. Louis continues to grow, and I know we kind of turn our nose up a little bit at times to Big AB.
Right.
But they are very supportive of the community. And there's a lot of things they do well that I think sometimes get overlooked. The 3 of us could leave here right now, and we could go to Moscow. Don't know why, but let's say we go.
Right.
And let's say we order a Budweiser. It's going to taste exactly the same. Their ability that they've honed in on a flavor and a style and a marketing approach, however you want to look at it, and it doesn't matter whether I'm in the northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere, I'm on the other side, I'm in China, I can order a Budweiser or a Bud Light, and it's going to taste the same. So the repeatability of a style is one thing that every brewer strives for. I don't want you to come back in 3 months and order another American Red and it tastes different. Right. I want all those same sensations, because you're going to be looking forward to it. I can't wait to go back. I'm going to get myself one of those Deslogetown American Reds, and then all of a sudden it's different. So, right. But the Brewers Guild is, like I said, a huge group of all the breweries in the St. Louis area, and the amount of support, the camaraderie, the sharing of information. It's not like, we're competing against each other, so to speak, because we all are going after craft beer drinkers, but it's not like it's a cutthroat deal. It is so collaborative. Guys are doing collaboration brews all the time. I know last year there was a couple of different breweries out of the St. Louis area. We were talking about, questions about, upscaling the production and what do you do when you get into distribution and things like that, and things we need to look out for and things we need to make sure we do. They're so helpful. So I've never been involved in a larger group where, again, we're competing against each other, but it doesn't feel like that at all.
Yeah.
Right.
It's such a cool thing. So, pick a day, pick 5 breweries in St. Louis and go to all of them. Okay, and there's so many to choose from, and do yourself that favor. Go on a little brew tour. Pick a Saturday afternoon and hit 4 or 5 of them, and you're going to have a blast. And you're going to meet so many cool people. You're going to try so many cool beers. But I encourage everybody to do that. And I realize I'm telling you to go to some other brewery,
right,
someplace else, and spend money with them. But do it, because you're missing out if you don't.
Yeah.
Well, to go back to Jeff Huck, like I was talking about earlier, he said his one of his favorite things about going to doing these competitions and stuff like that is, I mean, he loves other people, seeing the reactions of other people trying his beers, but his favorite thing is just being able to talk to all the other brewers that are down there and learning new stuff and everything like that. And he said the same exact thing you did, that it's a culture and everybody is just wanting to talk to everybody else about what they're doing and how to make their brews better.
Yeah, I don't know how many times, usually rarely a weekend goes by where we don't have either a commercial brewer or a home brewer come by. And Christy hates it because that usually means I'm not behind the bar taking care of customers. I'm usually sitting down and I'll talk to them. But that's one of the reasons we kind of got into it, is to be able to either help a home brewer, help them answer some questions for them, a little Q&A back and forth, or we had a guy in from Craftig within the last month, and our Kolsch was on tap, and he was like, he was asking me questions. It's like, no, wait a minute, you make Craftig, and you're asking me questions about my beer, but he was raving about it.
That's awesome.
So complimentary, and it's just like, you know, he doesn't have to do that, but the fact that he came in and he did is just, it's just awesome.
Now, Craftig, that's a AB spinoff,
Well, no,
right?
It is William K. Bush Brewing Company.
Okay.
So Billy Bush, part of that whole, was never involved with AB, but is a Bush that was involved, still connected. I'm sure he had stock.
Sure.
And when AB was bought out by InBev, he decided that he thought that was terrible. It was a loss of the city's heritage. It was a loss of the family's heritage. So he established Craftig. And they make a very traditional American lager, an American light lager. And, I mean, they don't use any fillers. When you have a glass of Craftig, you're getting a very traditional German lager. And I think that's kind of what we try to do here, is if you're going to do something very traditional, it's awesome that they're doing that. Because if you taste that and you're going to, wait a minute, this guy used to be the guy that was attached to the people that make Budweiser, and you think, okay, that was American lager. No, this is what they were going for.
Right, yeah. Yeah. And Craftig, I like it. I enjoy it. I have a Craftig every once in a while. I don't know if you've tried it yet, Colt, but it's...
I've had the light. I haven't had the dark, but I do like it. I really enjoy it.
So, yeah, it kind of stands out to me as far as I consider it a mainstream beer because there is that Bush tie there.
Sure,
and so maybe it's just a stigma that I have, but it's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it at all.
Yeah.
So, what makes your beer stand out? What is it exactly?
You know, I think we try to do certain styles in a traditional way, but I think some of the things that set certain beers apart, you know, like the red, the Cascade hops give it a different finish. I think our IPA, we use a lot of Centennial and Cascade hops in that. That is, I think it's an exceptional IPA. And I put it up against just about anyone out there. And our Imperial Stout, I have one of the things I don't like about stouts is stouts tend to be very dry. There's no sweetness to them at all. So when we made our Imperial, it was like, I want something I want my coffee with cream and sugar, okay? I don't want just black coffee. And so when we made the stout, it was like, let's find a way to give this a little sweeter taste. And I think that's what sets, and obviously, we go through stout a lot, so obviously we're onto something there.
Nice, yeah.
And a lot of our darker beers, like the Doppelsticker, like the Wee Heavy, we tend to try to let the malt, that backbone of the beer, really shine through, because a lot of times the backbone gets lost for all the other adornments, which are usually the hops.
Sure.
You know, a lot of people who, especially hop heads who are big time into the IPAs, you get so much of that bitter aroma and taste that sometimes you forget that none of this is possible without the malt being there, and the different types of malt that bring the flavor and the color to the beer. And so we try to make sure that our malt backbone is good and strong and solid. And on some of our beers, it is really the main, it's at the forefront. The hops are not the story there. We let the malt shine through. So I think that's what sets some of our beers, makes them distinct and different, is we're just not throwing a whole bunch of hops on top of a beer and trying to make it as bitter as we can. I think sometimes people forget that without the malt, there's nothing to ferment without the malt, so
Right.
it's not beer, or at least all it is colored, funny tasting water. There's no alcohol in it because
Right.
the malt's what deliver the sugars, and the sugars are what the yeast eat to make the CO2 and what they use to make the alcohol. So, we really try to let the malt shine through on some of our beers, and I think that sets them apart in some ways.
Nice. I love it. I love it. And it occurs to me as we're speaking and discussing the beers that you really have to love beer. You really have to love tasting beer, drinking beer, but the taste and the flavor, the smell, in order to do something that you do, and that's brewing the beer.
Well, I think that's why this culture is blowing up so much as it is, because at a certain point, and I don't know if it's an age thing or what it is, but at a certain point, you're not looking to drink beer just to get plastered all the time anymore.
Yeah.
You want it's something to sip, it's something to just hang around and just enjoy the flavor of, instead of just a Budweiser or whatever.
Right, and you talked about the brewing process. I love the smell of when you mash the beer, when you sparge the beer out, and then when you're boiling it, the wort as they call it, and you're adding the hops. That smell of a beer in progress
Yeah.
is intoxicating.
Nothing
And
short
you-
of amazing.
And you can't get drunk off of it because there's no alcohol there, but it is literally intoxicating. I love it. We don't have a brew day where we don't say every time, "Oh, smells like beer in here." It is just a wonderful. Now there may be some people that smell it and they go, "Oh," but it is. I think for some people, they smell it for the first time and they get hooked. It's part of that process that draws you in.
Yeah.
As a home brewer, if you decide to take the next step as a commercial brewer, but when you smell it and then of course you taste it and everything that goes into making it, it is such a sensory process. Because the color of a beer. We were making our red this morning. I'm holding up a glass with some red in it right now, and we were making our American red this morning, and we were drawing it out as we were getting ready to put it in the boil kettle.
Uh-huh.
It is the prettiest damn beer that we make. And just the color, it's this beautiful, rich amber. It's got golds and browns and reds to it, just almost like a ruby color, and you're like, look at that. That's a good looking. But that's the stupid stuff that brewers do. Is
Who would have thought pretty beer? This beer is pretty.
Right.
But I get it.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I agree. I love looking at the different colors, the different hues, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
On top of the smell and the taste and the culture. And where does this end? Are we
I hope it goes on forever.
So I gotta jump in here. You mentioned again that term doppel. What was it? You're supposed to explain this because
Doppelsticka. Yeah.
Doppelsticka, and my curiosity is piqued. Please explain.
Well, our beers have. It's huge. Okay, peanut gallery giving me notes here. So, we've done two special beers for each of our anniversaries. Our first anniversary is our Shotgun Wee Heavy, and it's a Scottish Wee Heavy. But it just so happened the day we were brewing the beer, Skip and like his sons Travis and Jesse were here, and they were, as you can tell, we have like sporting clays in here, stored in here. So they had the birdie thrower out, and they had their shotguns out, and we were shooting skeet over the winery, over the vineyard, and we're brewing beer at the same time. And it just seemed to be an automatic that the beer should be Shotgun Wee Heavy, and that's how it got its name.
Nice.
So when we were looking for a second anniversary beer this past January, it's in January, and we knew it was going to be a big beer, and I wanted to do something. The Wee Heavy's a Scottish beer. Wanted to do something maybe more German. So you start looking around, and you find that there is a beer style called Sticke, Sticke, which is also known as an alt beer, which is another German style. And there's a brewery in Germany that on the third week of January, and only the third week of January, they release a special release of their Sticka, which also is it can translate to secret beer. So the secret beer, because they don't tell anybody when they're going to do it, but it's usually the third week in January.
Right.
That's when they release it. And if you're there to get it, you get it. And if you're not there, you missed out. And it's the only time of the year that they do it. So they also do what they call a double or an imperial version of it, which means it's higher in alcohol. So a double or doppel. So it's our second anniversary, so it's a double, our second anniversary.
Right.
It's a Sticka, which is only released in January. That's when our anniversary is.
Okay, it's a secret,
and therefore we have our Doppel Sticka, and that's how we came about our second. Now I have and we'll take plenty of suggestions. Please send your cards and letters to Deslogetown Brewery, care of whatever, the Cerebral Entertainment Podcast.
There you
go. St. Francis County, Missouri 63601. But we need to come up with something for our third anniversary beer because we don't have one yet. But obviously January will be here before you know it, and we'll have to have something for our third anniversary. But that's how Doppelsticka came into being. And again, they're typically brewed to be one-offs. We make them, and we're just going to make them for the anniversary, and then that's done. But they've been so popular. We took shotgun to the Heritage Festival last year and blew through like 4 kegs of beer like that, just gone.
Nice.
And then the Doppel at the first anniversary didn't make it a day. I mean, it literally we tapped it that morning for the second anniversary party in January, and it didn't even finish the day. It was gone. So
wow.
Well, when it comes to certain beers, is there a lot of places that does that whole, we only have a certain amount on like a certain day, random day? Is there a lot of places that does that? Because I know like Huck had talked about one, what was that place called? Pie or something like that? It just had like a big pie sign on it, and you had to have cash, the exact amount of cash, and you only got a certain amount on a certain day
and
or
people
whatever.
were knocking each other over to get in the door because only so many were allowed before it would run out even.
Right.
So it was riotous.
I know Perennial does a limited release of their Abraxas beer every year. And if you're not in line and one of the first 400 in the line, you're not getting any.
Right.
So it's one of those deals where, there are limited edition releases on certain beers. And when it's there, and when it's gone,
right.
See you next year. So we're kind of and a lot of the breweries are, the big guys aren't that way. And they probably don't go through it as quickly because they're making upwards of 2,100 gallons of beer at a time, okay? We're making 25 gallons of beer at a time.
Yeah.
So, obviously, small batch, does that make us special? It makes us different.
Yeah.
It allows us to churn through our list a lot faster because we have such a limited quantity. But, and maybe that's a positive, but I think maybe some people find it's a negative because, we just had the folks in here a little while ago, and they got hooked on the Easy Wheat, and then the keg blew, and we put the Hefeweizen on, and they're like, what do you got, an Easy Wheat? And they're like, yeah, but would you like to try the Hefeweizen? So, and it turned out they did, so it was a good thing. But, people get hooked on something, and then it goes away.
Right.
It'll come back, and we hope you come back when it's on tap, but, sometimes it's a little disappointing when you it's like, I can drink this all day.
Right.
No, not today, because we're out, so...
Not to minimize or put on the same level as, but McDonald's does the same thing with the McRib. Mm-hmm. It's seasonal. And when
Shamrock Shake,
another great example. When it's there, it's a mad dash to get it. Mm-hmm. But then you go a month later and you say, I want a McRib with a Shamrock Shake. Guess what? You ain't getting it because that season has passed. You got to wait till next year.
Except you still haven't digested the first one.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. It's true.
At least not properly.
People are fanatic about the McRib.
I know.
There is a
Crazy.
special website called McRib Finder because not all McDonald's carry the McRib.
Right.
So if you are really hard up for a McRib, you can go to the McRib Finder website because apparently, like the state of that, like there's a part of Arizona, there isn't a single McDonald's in Arizona apparently that carries the McRib.
Wow.
So people in Arizona there was a short video on YouTube of this woman that showed up at the city council meeting. There she is, like Scottsdale, Arizona. and she's demanding that the city council do something about why there are no McRibs at the restaurant.
I've seen that. That was amazing. Somebody's got to stand up against this tyranny.
Well, we thought it was like, well, she's really passionate. What's she going on about? McRibs? Yeah, really? Okay.
Well, that kind of puts it into perspective for me now, though, because I didn't know that the McDonald's in Arizona didn't have McRibs. So now I kind of get it.
Yeah.
I thought
Now you understand her completely, right?
I do. I thought she's high or something. She's not right in the head in some way or another.
My first thoughts as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Wandered in off the street. I'm here to talk about the McRib. Oh, let's give her 5 minutes. Let's go. Okay.
Yeah, right.
We're a little dry over here, by the way, dear. My lovely bride.
Well, do you want to take a short little break and get a refill?
Actually, if we could do. No, you're not going to get on. Did you get the Heffa?
Yes, I did.
Okay, can we get 2 more glasses of Hefeweizen? Well, let's get. Actually, James, you want to do a short glass?
Sure.
And
yeah,
we'll
whatever.
taste. Let's do 2 little
tasting
glasses of the Heffa, and work our way up. And then, of course, you'll just have to drink yours faster.
Okay, that's fine. I might be slurring my words by the end of this podcast, but we'll be all right.
Sure.
But the Hefeweizen, again, is a great example of a very traditional style. It's a German style, and we make ours straight down the middle, traditional German Hefeweizen. So what sets a Hefeweizen apart from a traditional wheat beer is the yeast. All this flavor that you get in this beer, that flowery, that fruity, a lot of that flavor that you get in a Hefeweizen, it's not the hops, it's not the malt. It is literally a beer where we let the yeast shine through, and that's where that smell, that's where that taste all comes from, is the Hefeweizen.
Interesting.
So,
Yeah.
cheers, guys.
Cheers. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There we go. Enjoy.
Yeah, it's good.
I call that quality control, by the way.
Quality control. Yeah.
Well, that was one of the most amazing things to me, watching the process of the brewing, because for some reason, I guess in my head, I always thought there was a much bigger process than it is. I mean, not to downgrade it, it's still a huge process, but just a matter of the actual flavoring and what you get as a final the final thing comes from just your mainly your hops and your yeast and stuff. And I always thought that there was more to it that brought every different flavor into it and all that kind of stuff.
It's amazing when you think about it. Again,
Right.
those 4 ingredients and how they can make anything that can be as light and as fruity flavor as this to something that is dark and it's got chocolate and coffee and all that as our stout is.
Right.
So it's just amazing, and all that comes from those 4 things. It just blows me away. And then everything, we have a kind of like it's almost a periodic table up here on the wall in the ale house. And it all boils down to what it is it's a split of, there's 2 types of yeast. There's ale yeast and lager yeast. And all the different types of beer that you can make from either an ale yeast or a lager yeast. And obviously there's different styles within that, and a Hefeweizen is one of them. But it is a very simple process when it's broken down, is make sure everything's super clean and make sure everything is right from a temperature perspective, and you'll make good beer. So if anybody out there is like afraid to get into home brewing, make sure it's super clean and make sure you hit your temperatures, and you'll make great beer, and you'll drink great beer at your house, and you'll go, I can't believe I used to go to the store to buy this,
Right,
and I can drink it right here. So it's a fun process, and it's a remarkably simple process as long as you're very attentive to just some very key elements, and those 2 big ones are being sanitation and temperature.
Right.
Nice. And we have, I know personally, a lot of my friends, people I know, are very interested in brewing beer. And so we kind of have been catching a little bit of momentum here, talking about brewing beer, things like that, and it's just sparking that interest even more. And I'm encouraging them because they're going to need somebody from the outside to help taste test.
Absolutely. And you obviously have an educated palate,
Right.
so you know whether or not it's any good or not.
Exactly.
So might as well just run with it.
What does that term mean, Hefeweizen?
Hefeweizen, it stands basically for German wheat.
German wheat.
It is or a light wheat.
Okay.
Or a white wheat. Just depends on who you're asking and who you're talking to. But Weizen is obviously wheat, German for wheat. So,
Gotcha.
Most of the time, if you get a Hefeweizen, it's going to be cloudy. It's going to be unfiltered. In fact, there are some Hefeweizens, especially if it's served to you in a bottle, they recommend that you swirl it, before you even pour it, because at the bottom of that glass, at the bottom of that bottle, there's going to be some sediment that is settled out, but it's an integral part of the taste. So the idea that you're actually making your beer cloudier kind of goes contrary to how we were raised with the American lagers, but that's something that they encourage you to do. I know Boulevard's a great example of that. If you order their Hefeweizen, it'll say right on the side of the bottle to swirl that before you pour it, and it makes the beer actually cloudier.
I've seen that.
But that's a key part of the flavor profile, and if you don't do it, you're missing out.
Yeah, right. So you're missing on some of the flavor.
Yes.
Because what you're basically doing is mixing some of the sediment that has fallen down. You want that to be cloudy because then you get the flavor in every drink, as opposed to waiting until you get to the bottom and getting.
And there's a lot of craft beers that are going to be cloudy beers. It's just the way they're made. You're actually probably getting something that's closer to a traditional style. So if you get something and it's just not crystal clear, don't freak out. Okay?
Right.
It's okay.
Right.
Everything's going to be all right. We'll get
dirty.
through this together. But go ahead and if it's not to your liking, then. But there's another style out there for you to try.
Sure. Yeah.
If you don't like that one, then just have the next one.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like say the beers that you have on your board over here, I know several of them you've named after certain things. So you like the Shotgun Wee Heavy, you said just came about from shooting shotguns while you're you had Riley's Rebel Ale, and then I know Kryptonite, which you don't have anymore, but that was Christie's Kryptonite, right? Do you have anything else named after anybody or any certain thing or anything like that?
Anybody? Well, we have one that we like is called Nutter Sandwich. It's a nut brown ale, and the idea was that back in the day there used to be a tavern on every corner, and the guys would go in there after work, and inevitably somebody's missus had called down and went, "Is Tom in there?" And then if the bartender could tell the missus, "Well, Tom just ordered a Nutter Sandwich." "Oh, well, I'm glad to see that he's getting a sandwich," and turns out Tom just ordered another beer. So that was the guy and obviously sometimes when you come up with these names, there may be a little bit of alcohol involved. But Nutter Sandwich was one that it was like it's a nut brown ale, Nutter Sandwich. It just kind of morphed that way. So yeah, they all have different names. We had a porter that we made for a while called Chat Pile Porter, for obvious reasons.
There you go.
Pride of the Lead Belt. So well, in fact, the Hefeweizen, the full name on the Hefeweizen is actually called Buford Bottom Hefeweizen.
Nice.
You go over to Iron County, there's a place called Buford Bottom.
Right.
And our good friend Dennis and Deb, Dennis, who's never been much of a he's Busch beer drinker, right down the middle, Busch beer drinker. But Dennis always liked Hefeweizen. And Dennis, early on, when the brewery was just getting started, he'd come out and help. And it was like, "Dennis, if I could make a beer for you, what would it be?" He said, "Greg, I'd love to have a Hefeweizen." And I said, "Well, that wasn't one that we had on the menu, so let's make a Hefeweizen." And we decided, as a tribute to Dennis and his contribution, let's just call it Buford Bottom Hefeweizen. And what's kind of cool since then is Dennis and Deb have taken it since then. They've grown some hops on their farm that we've incorporated into some of our beers.
Great.
Including our the American Red. They grow Cascade hops for us. We've used it in the red, and we actually did a Buford Bottom Hefe with Cascade hops. And Cascades are totally the wrong hop to use in a Hefeweizen. A Hefe is a very traditional German beer, so it uses what they call a noble hop. Noble hops are traditional European hops that have been around forever. That was the idea behind Buford Bottom Hefe. So
I love that.
Yeah, so we're enjoying a little Buford Bottom right now.
Buford Bottom. And the great thing, and I was thinking about this earlier too, the naming of the beer, yet another rabbit hole to go down, because that's just fun. It's fun to come up with the names of this stuff because it's yours.
Second Shift Brewery in St. Louis. And they just moved from New Haven out to onto the hill, actually. They're just off the hill. They have a beer called El Gato Grande, and it's actually named after, they have a cat that hangs out in the brewery, and it's a big fat cat. So he's El Gato Grande, and there is the name of a beer. Boom, just like that.
I got one the other day called like Voodoo Ranger or something like that.
Yeah, that's from New Belgium.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah,
that's an IPA. Don't ask me how they came up with that.
I guess it don't matter. I mean, if you make your own beer, you can make whatever name it whatever you want. But.
Yeah, there's some great names out there. St. James has a brewery out there. What is the name of that
Public
beer?
House.
Public House. That's right.
They do like Rod's Cream Ale.
They have a stout. Revelation. It's not
I think that's right.
Is it Revelation Stout? Okay,
yeah.
That's actually some pretty good stuff. It's not too shabby.
They do some good stuff there, Public House.
Yeah.
And that's a neat place to visit. If you're going to go up 8, and up 19 through Cuba.
Right.
They're right there on 44. They're easy to get in and out of. Totally recommend visiting, especially in the summertime when they've got that shared patio between the winery and kind of like, obviously a much larger version than what we have here, but a shared patio between the winery and the brewery. But totally a cool place. And that's the neat thing about any of those places in St. Louis. Some of them are in warehouses. Some of them are down in the Lafayette Square area or Soulard. Some of them are, have big patios and fountains and stuff like that. So there's so many different environments to enjoy beer in as well.
Absolutely, right. That's another part of the culture of it. Just going to the different environments, and the wineries are typically a great environment. You have the fields, the vineyards, the scenic views, things like that. But just another good reason to come out and do this thing. And speaking of recommending, I highly recommend people come out to the St. Francis Winery and check out the Deslogetown Brewery.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. That means a lot. So, and just remember, life is better with beer. Okay.
I've been told.
Imagine beer without it. Imagine life without beer. I can't.
I'd rather not.
I'd rather not.
So I can't, Greg, go any further without mentioning that you have a radio voice.
Yeah. I've been accused of that.
I want to know more about that, if you don't mind. Tell me about your radio experience.
Well, that was actually what I went to school for.
Really?
I went, graduated from high school and went to Central Missouri State, now the University of Central Missouri. Got in their mass comm program, and I was gonna be a radio disc jockey. And this was 1984. And everybody was the idea of CDs, let alone MP3s, had not been conceived of yet.
Right.
In fact, it was interesting. There was a big jock that actually worked in San Francisco and Chicago for a while, by the name of Mancow was his name. Eric Mueller. He and I were in the same class together. It was interesting because we both got jobs at the same time working overnights in the local area. So we were going to classes, but working from midnight to 6 at a local radio station, but then had to get up or basically stay awake and go to an 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock class. So he was working at the local AM called KOKO, Coco in Warrensburg, and I was working at the country music station in Knobnoster called KLUK, Cluck. Serious as a heart attack, man. I am not making. I know. It's like, oh,
you can't make this up.
He's so full of crap. No, it's serious. And at the time, because it was one of those deals where it was like, you know what, I could either continue to go to school for 4 years to get my degree in mass communications, so that I can be. Oh, wait a minute, I'm already a disc jockey. So I dropped out of school. And because I was living the dream, I was working in commercial radio, and then the station got sold, and everybody was out of a job. So early on, everybody got a smack in the face on what it was like to work in commercial radio, and some of them went on. I knocked around and did some fill-in work in Kansas City, and then I moved back to St. Louis, was where I'm originally from, and did some fill-in work in St. Louis, and then. A buddy of mine actually tells me the story goes like this. He goes, there's this guy. He says, you're looking for a full-time gig. There's a guy that graduated from Broadcast Center in St. Louis, and he took this job down at a place called Flat River. And there's no way in the world he hasn't been fired by now, because they said he was an idiot. Everybody knew he was an idiot, and I don't even know the guy's name. So I called. Well, it turns out that the AM station in Flat River, KFMO, had just been bought back by one of its owners. And it was a gentleman by the name of Randy Boson. And Randy owned a station in Clinton, Missouri, which was within earshot of the station in Knobnoster. And he's like, Greg Camp, I know you. I used to listen to your show. well, I'm looking for a job. He says, well, you know what? I need a noon to 6 guy. I was like, okay, cool. When can I start? And like 2 weeks later, that was in 1987. I left I worked down there for about a year, and then I left to go back to school, met my first wife, and then I get a phone call from Larry Joseph, the general manager at KFMO, and he says, I need a program director. I want you to come back. I want you to run the station. That was in 89, and I've been down here ever since. I started in 89 at KFMO. In 94, we had a B104. I became the morning guy at B104, doing 6 to 10 on the breakfast show. So we would get up early so you wouldn't have to, as we like to say. And I did that up until 2007, and ran both the AM and FM station, and also did the morning show, and obviously went out and did sports. You know, whether it was basketball, football, baseball, volleyball, you name it. So we did that for 20 years. And probably got out at about the right time because radio, especially radio today, is a young man's game. Although some would say brewing is a young man's game too, because we go to these Brewers Festival meetings, and it's like I am old enough to be everybody's dad in here. But like me and like Steve Kreider from Second Shift, we're like the oldest guys in there. Everybody else is like, you know, wet behind the ears, and it's like, do you have a driver's license yet?
No, but I brew beer. And that's what's important.
Well, and that's all that matters.
That's right.
So yeah, we did, and you know what? And that's what I think so cool about what you're doing here, because, you know, I was raised when radio still had that, and it's a shame that it's lost some of its luster, but it's fragmented to the point where maybe not everybody is served by what it has to offer. And the fact that there are people who want to listen to content, whether it's music or whether it's conversation, and they can do it on demand whenever they want. Just got to download it, just click on a button, and they can have this conversation. They can have anybody else's conversation available in a podcast. It is so consumer friendly, which I think is awesome, because a lot of times, you know, and I'll be honest, I listen to KSHE. That's my favorite radio station. I grew up on KSHE. KSHE actually sucked for a while, but they don't suck anymore. And so I enjoy listening to them. But every once in a while, they'll play a song that I don't like, and I'll start channel hopping. Or God forbid, back in the day, because I was definitely against it, was Sirius XM. When I was working in radio, it was like satellite radio. You shut your mouth. Right. I mean, don't you dare even talk about that around here.
Heresy.
Now I'm not in radio, so it's like, yeah, I got a subscription, and I got it, and it's on in here, it's on over there, it's in the car, it's in the camper, it's everywhere. So I think the consumer obviously needs to be entertained, and as soon as they hit that button and they're going someplace else, you're not necessarily doing your job. But the idea that they can download this podcast and kill an hour or however long. How long does this thing last anyway?
You know, it just depends on how long we want to go.
Whenever you shut up, we'll stop.
Let's go for a record. No.
No, it's going great, and you're right. That's one of the things that drew both Colt and myself into podcasting, because if you go and look at the categories, if you want to learn a new skill, or if you want to be educated, or if you want to be entertained, or if you want to hear news, or if you want to hear something about music, or whatever you want, it's in a podcast somewhere. That's why I tend to call it the podcast universe, because the universe is ever expanding, right?
Yeah.
And that's how the podcast universe is. It's just like there was a big bang at some point in time, and it's just been expanding ever since. And we were just happy to jump in, you know, and blast off, you know, in this universe. It's great.
And it's content that may have, say, 20 years ago been available on radio that's not anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, there were programs, you know, you could tune in on a Saturday night or a Sunday morning, and you might be able to get some general information, or you could get some very specific information where it's like, okay, hey, they do a special show about the Beatles, and that's all they talk about is the Beatles. Or they could do, you know, NPR was always a great source. The Click and Clack, the automotive show. You could call in and, oh, you got a 79 Malibu, huh? What's it doing? Okay, well, this is how you fix it.
Yeah.
And now you have to go to other sources.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have you been working on something? I know, like I have a Jeep, So, needless to say, if I need to know how to take something apart or put it together on my Jeep, there's a YouTube video out
I
there.
know, right?
Yep.
I learned how to fix my washing machine. I know jack about washing machines.
Right.
Got on YouTube, bam, I had that thing fixed. We were washing clothes.
Yeah,
That was
it's
it.
amazing.
Yeah, it's
I was
awesome.
like- and if you think about it, 20 years ago, this stuff didn't exist.
Right, yeah.
You called a repairman,
Yeah.
or you got out an encyclopedia or something. I don't know what they did back then.
And
so.
that's the thing, too. I had to take the agitator off and replace a piece down there and then tighten it up. A repairman would have cost me out the yin-yang,
Oh, yeah,
right?
$80 just to show up at the house.
It cost me a couple dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, it cost me a couple dollars. What would have cost me, maybe $80, $100 if
Outstanding.
I were to call
Yeah.
a repairman.
Yeah.
Nice.
God bless YouTube. God bless it.
Well, don't get Don Henley started on YouTube, okay?
Yeah.
And the evil Google empire. Well, and I get where he's coming from. Obviously, he feels that back in the day, that's how songwriters got paid,
Right.
where the song got played.
Yeah.
And nowadays,
Yeah.
it's maybe not the same, but that's the old method. So you need to find a new method.
That's right. You got to grow with the times right now, because if you don't, then you're just going to get left behind, because there's
Exactly.
no stopping it.
Exactly.
We talk
Right.
about that in respect to technology oftentimes. I fear technology in a lot of ways, but here it is. It's coming. It's not slowing down. So you just got to jump on board. And Metallica was the same way with the whole the pirating and
Yeah.
the, what was the first site that was sharing music?
Oh, there was like Napster.
Napster. That
Napster.
was
Yeah.
it. Oh, they
Yeah.
were. James Hetfield was going crazy over
Yeah.
Napster.
But you get them shut down, and what happens? LimeWire pops up.
Right.
Exactly.
And then what
Pirate
happens?
Bay.
Yeah, exactly.
Just keep going.
Just keep on going. It's
Yeah.
like, well, you're going to go ahead and shut that one down. Trust me. Once
I-
people get a taste for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I just love this setup here because back in the day, and I hate to keep saying that, but I'm the one with the gray beard here. So this broadcast, so to speak,
Yeah.
there would be twice as much stuff on the table, and it would be twice the size of the stuff that's on this table. So, there's something to be said for the technology and where it's taking us and what it's doing us. It gives us more access. It gives us more immediate access. It gives us more specialized access. So I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome. I probably got out of radio at the right time, and that was 10 years ago in 2007, because that older method of delivering content, I don't think it can keep up with where
Right.
the content is going, where people how people expect to get the content.
Right.
So that's cool. It's
Yeah.
cool.
And so much of the choice, kind of like what you mentioned earlier with NPR. NPR is doing podcasting now too. They have
Yeah,
several
they
shows.
have
Oh, yeah.
a lot.
Several shows where they're and it's very highly produced. You can tell it's very professional. How they come across, because they understand you got to stay with the times if
Right.
you're going to stay in the game.
Exactly.
And NPR they've been a staple of talk radio since
Forever.
right?
As long as I can remember.
Yeah.
In
They're
fact,
prob-
my first radio job was at a campus station running. I would run on Friday nights. I would run a program called Music from the Hearts of Space, which was just a bunch of let's all get stoned for 2 hours music. and then on Sunday mornings, I would do the London Symphony Orchestra for 2 hours.
Nice.
Which were on big reel-to-reels. And you'd load one up and you hit play, and then you go take a nap for 55 minutes. And then you'd come in at the top of the hour, you'd have the second one loaded up, and you'd go, "You're listening to FM 91 KCMW Warrensburg," and then hit play on the second one and go take a nap for another 55 minutes. So
That's like my kind of job.
that was a good job.
Where do I sign up?
We were volunteers at the campus station, but that was my first real radio gig, was running 2 hour-long programs, and all you had to do was the station ID right in the middle, and that's all you had to do.
That's
So-
awesome.
The nap
Yeah.
part sounds awesome.
And I can't believe I remember that. KCMW FM 91 in Warrensburg, Missouri. So I think it's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Warrensburg. What school is that? Is that Missouri?
That's
Valley?
Central Missouri State.
Central Missouri
yeah,
State.
but
Okay.
it's called University of Central Missouri. But that's the Go Mules, Go Jennies. That's the
Greg, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you having us out here.
glad to be
at
here. We need to
Deslogetown
get
Brewery.
another beer.
Yeah,
you
we-
need
we
to drink a little
definitely will.
faster.
I'm sorry,
we're-
man. I'm sorry.
We're going to take a little break.
Let's do that.
I'm going to mention it several times. after this, but just want to mention right now that Deslogetown Brewery at St. Francois Winery, y'all got to come out here. This is a great spot.
Thanks, man. I
We're
appreciate
having a
it.
blast so
Glad-
far, and
glad
we're
you
not
guys-
done yet. So
All right.
yeah,
Good deal.
yeah, and
Good.
we'll have you
Spread the-
back on before we stop. So
Okay, cool.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Greg, we really appreciate you
Yeah.
having us out, man. This has been a blast. Right now, we're drinking the heavy wheat.
You're doing the wheat heavy. It's
Wheat
the-
heavy, I'm sorry.
It's no, that's okay. This is a Scottish style. This was our first anniversary beer. It's typically what's known as a Scottish wheat heavy. We call it shotgun wheat heavy, and you can tell it by the tapper because it's the only one up there with the shotgun shell on it.
Nice.
And we had talked earlier. That malty backbone without a lot of the bitterness that comes from a hop.
Mm-hmm.
This is a quintessential example of that style where you're really heavy on the malt and very light on the hop, and at the same time it's a big beer. It's 7%, and people like beer with a little bit of a warmth to it. You know, it's warm when it's going down, and like on a cool night like it was with 40 degrees outside. Here we are in April, and we're still having late winter temperatures outside, but
Right.
it's all good. This beer is one of those ones that probably would have never come to us if it hadn't been for, again, the audience, the people, the craft beer drinkers coming to us and saying, you know what, that light stuff is all well and good, but give us the big beers. We want that Imperial Stout. We want, well, the beer we retired, the Kryptonite. I know you're a big fan, Colt, of the Kryptonite,
Right.
and we had to let it go. But we replaced it with something similar to it, the Triple X Gold. Again, another high ABV beer. We got that. We got the Doppelsticker. So people like those big beers, and the big beers typically have a lot of flavor to go with them too.
Yeah,
So,
right.
I think that's one of the cool things about getting into this now that we're 2+ years into it now, is the fact that I think I underestimated the local craft beer audience. It was like, okay, we're gonna get a bunch of Bud Light drinkers that'll be trying a craft beer for the first time, but there were enough people in St. Francis County and surrounding counties that had done their beer education,
Yeah.
and they were like, oh, now there's a place close to home, and I've already figured out what I like, and I like this stuff. So they came out to see us, and they've demanded that we do it, and and that we talked about that earlier about the flexibility of brewing smaller batches. We can do that. And if you said right here, right now, you two guys said, Greg, I want you to make a beer that's like this, this, and this, I could probably come up with a recipe, and we could brew it next weekend or the weekend after next. In about 4 weeks, we could all sit right back down here at this table and talk about that beer. So there's your homework. Okay.
Challenge accepted.
Okay, so this is what we need to do. Okay, right here, right now. We don't have to do it today. Okay, but we need a Cerebral Entertainment podcast beer.
Oh, snap.
Holy crap.
Oh, wow.
So decide what you like. To tell me color profile, flavor profile, hop profile. What do you like in a beer? And you can just tell. So I like. We were talking earlier before we went on about like Founder's Breakfast Stout. Okay, you like that? Okay, we can do something like that. That's an oatmeal stout. Okay, you like something like the Shotgun, but maybe it needs more hop, or maybe it needs something like that. So let's work on that, because that's the fun part about making beer, is people tell you something about a particular beer they had, or a style, or a profile. I was talking with someone here earlier this week about there's what they call farmhouse ales or saisons, and we don't make one. They're very lower in alcohol, but they got tons of flavor, kind of like the Hefeweizen, where there's just a lot of floral, a lot of sweetness. We could do something like that. So we need a CEP beer, right?
I like it.
Don't you think we need a CEP?
I do.
Man,
I
come on.
and then when we roll it out, you guys come back, and we try it all for the first time.
Yeah.
I have an idea. We need a sponsor, right? So he'll just sponsor some beer.
It's kind of a trade-out deal.
Yeah, right.
You give us beer, and we
we'll
talk about it on the podcast.
Right. We'll promote you every episode, and you just give us free beer.
I'll put your name on the back of their t-shirt.
Cerebral
There you
Entertainment
go.
Podcast brought to you in part by
Deslogetown Brewery.
Make sure you get his T-shirt size too. Him and his wife.
Free t-shirt for you.
Skip's gonna need one.
Yeah. Make sure we get
Skip's
some.
going to need one. There's
yeah.
no doubt. But
She's gonna have us some T-shirts.
Because this is the fun part about beer.
Right.
Was like, and you again, I go back to the Christie's Kryptonite, and I know you love that beer. And when we were able to do that consistently, we hit it out of the park. But we were having some yeast issues, and we kept getting these off flavors. And it was like, I'm not going to serve it. It's just not a quality product, so we had to let it go. So we found a replacement for it, but that came from me sitting down and going, okay, I want a little of this, a little of this, a little of this, a little of this. You throw it all together. But I would love to have some collaborative input. So maybe from you guys, well, not you. That's my old buddy Tim Hawkins over there. I can't say. And you know what? You kick ass. I don't care what anyone says, okay?
Hang on, I got to know where this comes from because I seen a picture on Facebook about this with a little arrow above your head saying that he kicks ass. What's
This
up with
man
this?
is when they wrote the song Wichita Lineman, it was actually Farmington Lineman, and it's about him. Okay,
Gotcha.
So Glenn Campbell wrote that song about Tim Hawkins, and
Okay.
obviously before he was ever born. But Tim Hawkins kicks ass. So I get you. Hey, I got a plug in there for you, buddy. All right, you buy me a beer later. All right, cool. But we digress. So let's do that. Let's see if we can't get something collaboratively together. And obviously, James, you've got some beer knowledge, some beer education, some stuff that you like, that you really dig. Colt, you're newer to the scene, but that's okay.
I'm getting there.
You're getting there. So whatever you like, and everybody else, you're drinking wine, but that's okay.
So Dustin's going to ask how we can mix vodka in there somewhere. And
You know what? I did that one time.
Really?
Actually, I take
Whoa.
that back. I put Captain Morgan Spice Rum in a beer one time.
Oh, wow.
And it gave it a really interesting flavor.
I could
Obviously, the
imagine, yeah.
Spice rum. There's a lot of things you can do with beer, and that's one of the neat things about it. That's why I love it so much. So.
It's awesome.
Can you get a beer? That's a good question right there.
Well, we could. Yeah.
You gotta make it taste good.
Well, duh.
this is Deslogetown Brewery. Come
Yeah,
on
right.
now.
No, I want to make it taste like crap, and nobody will want to drink it, and then I'll be stuck with it, and then on some cold, dark night when I'm alone, and I'll just drink it all by myself. Yeah, no, that's not how that works. It's not how that works.
Greg, thank you again, and thank your wife too. She's running
Christy,
around here.
who
She's-
refuses to speak.
I know.
We tried very hard.
And
I appreciate that.
and thanks to Skip too.
Yeah, and again, Mr. Doherty, without whom none of this would be possible. That's right. And he's ready. Okay, when it comes, then he's ready. But so just warning everybody out there. Okay, if you're thinking about it, Skip's ready for you. So just be on guard. But no, we were talking this morning. We're brewing beer. I know I mentioned this off the air or off the pod. Is that what we say? It's off the pod.
Not until now, but I like it.
Okay, so off the pod, I mentioned it off the pod, but we were talking about we were brewing beer this morning. I said, hey, I got these guys coming out. They do this podcast. They really do some cool stuff. I've listened to some of it, and he's like, that is your department. That is not my department. I do not do interviews. I do not do photographs. I'm like, okay, we'll take care of it. So it's all good. But great having you guys here. Great crowd, by the way. You
Definitely.
guys bring a good crowd. Some of it, of course, spontaneously. Some of it, or just obviously your crowd, and there was another crowd who thinks we have beautiful eyes. And but I'm glad that everybody was here. It, just kind of all came together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had a great time, man.
Hopefully we can do this again, and next time we'll have a new beer sitting in front of us that is our own brand.
Okay,
Dude, that
so
is exciting.
we need to
I'm
communicate
excited.
about that. Okay, let's figure out
Definitely
what we like,
keep in touch. Yep.
and then we got a CEP beer coming up.
Awesome. Sounds great.
That's awesome. Thanks
All right.
again, man.
Oh, love to do it. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah.
In other words, they jostle her around like crazy.
Serious as a heart attack, man.
Hey, what's up, all you Cerebral people out there? Thanks for checking out this episode of the Cerebral Entertainment Podcast. Thanks very much to Greg Camp for getting on the mics with Colt and I. We had a great time out there. And thanks to Deslogetown Brewing as well as the St. Francois Winery. You all got to get out there. You got to check this place out. We're going to be back out there again to do a little follow-up with Greg and try out the new CEP beer one of these days. So don't forget to like us on Facebook so you can follow along with all the events and interviews and podcast reviews that are up and coming. And also check us out on Instagram. And don't forget to listen to us right here on the YouTube channel. And we will be on iTunes soon, I promise. We're working on it, okay? So just hang in there. And please, for the love of Pete, don't forget to keep your brains warm. We'll see you next time.
This has been another episode of the Cerebral Entertainment Podcast.